This is Lynn Kinst. I am the Executive Director of the Hemophilia Council of California. I want to welcome you to this evening's Advocacy and Policy webinar. We are calling tonight, taking it to the screens. You know, the whole expression, taking it to the streets. Well, yet again, we haven't been able to figure out how to be in person this year, but we are going to do our advocacy and we're going to do it virtually. So we're taking it to the screens. And tonight we're going to be talking about how to prepare for our legislative day that is coming up quickly on Friday. So just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. We do have Spanish interpretation available this evening if anyone is more comfortable hearing in Spanish. And we also wanted to be able to record this for Spanish speaking community members who might benefit from accessing this information at a later date. So you can follow the instructions on your screen and they will be, we'll put them back in the chat again as well to access the Spanish interpretation. Here are the directions for accessing the interpretation in on an Android or an iOS device, so if you're using your phone. So this is going to be a little bit of a hybrid webinar tonight. So in this first portion of the webinar, we're going to be presenting some information to you, helping you to prepare. We do still want that to be interactive. So, you know, we'll provide opportunities throughout the presentation for people to unmute themselves and ask questions. You can also use the chat to make a comment or ask a question. We hope that you will interact with the information and feel comfortable if you have any questions about what we're discussing. And then once we go through that information, it will become even more interactive because we will put you in breakout rooms with the group of people that you will be with on Friday doing your legislative meetings. So just a caveat, I know that there are a couple people who couldn't be here tonight. So your group may not be 100% complete, but all of your group leaders should be here and they will be able to sort of assist you and guide you through that, that preparation process. I will say this again when we prep for breakout rooms, but you know, there is no requirement that you stay on the phone until 7:30 in order to fulfill everything tonight. So if we get through all of the information and your group, you know, introduces themselves and practices and everyone feels confident for our meetings on Friday, you know, you can feel free to wrap up and drop off once your group is complete. So just some of our normal reminders again. Please do mute when you're not speaking, but we will have an opportunity to unmute and ask questions. If you're on your phone, you can use *6 to mute and unmute. We always strive to provide accurate information, but we are not providing medical advice or legal counsel in this presentation. And this webinar is being recorded as you were warned at the beginning. So just briefly, as we roll into today's presentation, just want to make folks a little bit familiar with what the Hemophilia Council is for anyone who maybe this is your first time participating in our state advocacy days. The Hemophilia Council was formed in 1982 by the 4 California bleeding disorders organizations. So that's the Hemophilia Foundation of Northern California, the Hemophilia Foundation of Southern California, the Central California Hemophilia Foundation, and the Hemophilia Association of San Diego County. Those 4 groups came together and formed the Hemophilia Council of California, and it was incorporated as a 501c3 in 1989. It initially, in those early years, a lot of the work that the Hemophilia Council did was in response to the HIV contamination of clotting factor. And as that issue became sort of less at the forefront of the bleeding disorders community, the Hemophilia Council adapted and really is focused today on being a patient advocacy organization to coordinate education, advocacy, and access to healthcare for the bleeding disorders community in California. As I said, we advocate to protect access to care, to promote progressive treatment options, and to advance the quality of life of individuals, families, and caregivers living with hemophilia, von Willebrand's, and other related bleeding disorders. In line with that, our mission is to improve access to care and treatment options in order to advance the quality of life for people with bleeding disorders through advocacy, education, and outreach in collaboration with our founding member organizations. And our vision is open access to quality, innovative care, and choice of treatment for all people with bleeding disorders. So today we're really going to jump into what the issues are that we're going to be talking about on Legislative Day. I know that that image on your screen is pretty small type, so I'm not expecting you to be able to read that right at the moment. But we're really, so Legislative Day this year is a little bit later than when we often schedule our Legislative Day. Typically we might be in the March or April timeframe. But it's actually an amazing time for us to be going to speak to our legislators. So the issues that we're going to be talking about are all focused on the state budget. And the governor just released the May revise last Friday. And and then this is going to be going to the Senate and Assembly budget committees are looking at that May revise and beginning the process of kind of putting together the state budget. And so we are really excited to be able to present this information to everyone and to be able to advocate for these budget issues. It's the perfect time, honestly, to be bringing these budget issues to our legislative partners. But we'll get into the specifics of that, a little bit more in a minute. Just hold on one second, because we had a little bit of an issue with some people not being able to get in. So I want to make sure we get everyone on. Okay, so sorry about that pause. Let's go. So before we jump into the issues themselves, I want to just chat a little bit about how you can get prepared for your virtual visits. So I think many of you have participated in legislative days before, either here at the state level or in Washington, D.C. Some of you have done that in person. Some of you have done that virtually already, but here are just a few of the tips that we would like to share. And there is a document that was in the toolkit that we shared with all of the participants that actually kind of outlines some of these same points, which is tips for virtual advocacy. First, obviously review the materials in advance. That's what we're doing now. But you do have those toolkits, so you can feel free to pull them up on your computer or your iPad or print them out, whatever's comfortable for you, and kind of review the talking points in advance. You can also practice your story. Your team leaders will give you an opportunity to do that tonight. But if you're not feeling super comfortable with sharing your story, you can practice in a mirror, you can practice with a friend or a family member. It's great to kind of just get that story down before you jump in on Friday. In terms of your attire and your your background, your setting, we do encourage folks, and I think that there was a question on the registration form as to whether or not you had a red tie that you were feeling like you could use for our meetings. But we do encourage people to use, wear red or wear a red tie or a red scarf or something along those lines. And I believe that we did send out some ties for those that needed them. If that is, because we do associate that red tie with bleeding disorders. And so that's just a fun way to make our visits a little bit more memorable. Aside from that, usually we would suggest business attire if we were meeting in person, but since we're just on the screen, business casual is appropriate. You want to try to have your space quiet. I mean, you are going to probably mute and unmute when you're talking or not talking. So that's helpful to keep your meetings moving smoothly. But, you know, it helps if you can find a place that's not a lot of background noise and not too many visual distractions. Props are encouraged if you have something that you can show, you know, your excuse me, legislator or legislative staffer. So you know, if you could be like something related to your treatment, it could be something related to, you know, a sporting equipment or something that your treatment allows you to be able to enjoy and participate in. Or it could be a photo of somebody that maybe you're advocating on behalf of. If you have any props or things that you want to use to help tell your story, be sure to have those nearby. I also would encourage you, and this is something that we did with our future leaders this year, and I think it was really helpful. Sitting on Zoom all day or much of the day can be really tiring. And so don't forget to, like, in between meetings, if you have time, get up from your computer, you know, stretch, like move your body, because it gets a little tiring just sitting here staring at the screen. And then well, you can't really see it because of my background, but I have my water bottle here. And, you know, it's important that you stay hydrated. So have water close by. You know, if your throat suddenly starts to feel scratchy like mine did a minute ago, it's good to have that, you know, nearby and be able to get a drink of water if you need it. Okay. Any other comments or questions on those tips? Feel free, if you have other thoughts or suggestions, feel free to throw those in the chat. So next, I want to briefly talk about a meeting with your legislator. And so we want to encourage you to log in early. So try to get on that call, you know, at least 5 minutes before the scheduled time so that you're ready to go in the virtual meeting room when your either excuse me, or legislative staff arrives. And I really want to encourage you. Sometimes people can feel a little bit discouraged. They're like, oh, it's not the legislator, and they feel discouraged about that. The meetings that you have with staff are just as valuable as the meetings that you have with legislators. In fact, in many cases, the staff members that you're meeting with specialize in health policy, or that's one of their specializations. So they're the ones that are then going to take that information and brief the member about the issue. And so it's just as important that you communicate that to the staff member. And then in addition, a lot of the staff members continue to work in politics and continue to work in the state capitol long after their boss maybe has moved on to something different. So in an era of term limits where members have to move on and take a different office or take a different career path after a certain period of time, these staff people will continue to work in the building. They'll continue to work on health policy issues. So when you are raising awareness about bleeding disorders and our issues with those staff people, that impact is going to last in the public arena. Be understanding if they are running late. Sometimes it's just impossible for them to stay on schedule because of conflicts that happen or last minute issues that arise. Team leaders, I will say this, if your appointment is more than 5 minutes late, please go ahead and reach out to the contact in the office and make sure that they're still planning to join you and they have what they need in order to connect, because it could be a connection issue. But if for some reason you don't get that staff member, one of the advantages of being on Zoom is you could quickly record your presentation for them and then send that to them after the meeting if for some reason you missed them. And then I would say start your meetings with introductions. Always make sure you introduce everyone that's in the room before you get rolling. It's a little awkward when people just start talking and you don't introduce everyone. And sorry, constituents should go first. and can take the lead in the meeting, but they don't have to be the only ones to speak. And then last couple of points, we would encourage you use persuasion, not confrontation. Many of the legislators that we're meeting with have been supportive of the budget items that we're going to be talking to them about. So we want to thank them and just be compelling in the telling of our personal stories, which will gather their attention. And then you don't all need to be experts in all of the issues that are on your sheet. You could just, we would encourage you to focus on just one issue that most closely aligns with your personal story and ask the legislator for their support of that issue. And then my last little note on meeting with your legislators is if you get asked a question, never make up an answer if you're unsure of the answer to the question that they ask. It's always appropriate to say, hey, that's a great question. I'm not sure of the answer, but let me write it down and we will make sure that we get back to you. And then you can bring that question back to me, to Terry, our lobbyist, and we can follow up with that office and get the answer to them. We may know it or we may not know the answer, but we can research it and follow up with them if we don't know. Okay, so with that sort of introduction to kind of what those meetings are like and some tips, I am going to, excuse me, I'm going to introduce everyone to our guest speaker tonight. So Deanna Krofskayo is the Assistant Director at the Governor's Offices of Emergency Services currently, but she's got extensive experience as a journalist and a communications professional in the Capitol and in other sort of arenas of government. And she has long been a supporter of the Hemophilia Council's Future Leaders and our advocacy initiatives. And we always love having her come and share some of her experiences. So she's gonna just share with us a little bit and help kind of prepare us for meetings by giving her tips and tricks and what she has found to be effective when advocates have met with her in the past. So Deanna, you ready to share your thoughts?
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak. Lynn, I feel like you gave them all the tips. That's it. We're done. No, but honestly, you guys have been, great advocates for obviously yourselves, your community, your families. So, and many of you kind of have this experience already. But one thing that I would say, and I'll just start off, that I always, I benefited from a fellowship, over 10 years ago. I love the mentorship. So if you guys have any questions, need help, if you like this life of politics, if you like the life of communications, I just want to offer myself as an advocate for you guys, as a resource. Don't be afraid to email me, call me. I'm happy to look at resumes too, if you're interested. Anyways, I just want to get that out of the way. But I think, Lynn really did say it all, but I'll highlight on a few things. My brain is kind of messaging focused. It's journalism oriented. I'm a, communications person. So the one thing I think about, and I think the one thing that helped me when I would have meetings with constituents or with advocates that would come by the office, is that, I think, like, what is that 10-second elevator pitch? If you were stuck with a staff person or a senator or assembly member in the elevator, what are that first sentence you would say to them to convince them or to let them know about your cause? And in that same elevator pitch, I always like to think that it's also about that headline, right? If you were to be able to have the LA Times or the New York Times or Sacramento Bee, San Francisco Chronicle to say, your story in a headline, what would you want that to be? And that's essentially, I think, what staffers, what a member will take away from your meeting with them. I think Lynn was absolutely right. A lot of the times I would see forlorn faces when I would say, I'm sorry, but the member's not available for the meeting, but I'm more than happy to take it. I'm going to be honest with you, staff has more power than elected officials sometimes. They're the ones that are writing all the bills. They're writing the analyses. They are writing the fact sheets. They are, there to advocate for the cause that you have presented to them. And the members, honestly, sometimes, they are kind of that voice, right? But the staff person is behind the scenes doing all the work. So don't feel a certain way, don't feel bad that, oh, I just got a staff person. Honestly, they are oftentimes more important and they have more knowledge and experience sometimes than a lot of the members that come in exactly right, like Lynn said, because of term limits or have to leave, or they come in fresh from political life. The other thing I would say too is that I always really appreciated kind of that storytelling and that personal aspect. If you are a constituent of that representative, if you live in that area, let them know. I think that is, kind of the biggest thing. And then also be able to share that story. I know you'll only have a few minutes with them, but share a story, make it personal so that they can see, this is your life, you're passionate about it, and you are an advocate, for yourself and for your family. So being able to personalize it really helps to create and lead that story. And that staff person later on that day, or later on when they brief the member, the chief of staff, say, hey, I had a really interesting interaction in one of my meetings, and they advocated for this budget item, and they said directly how that would help them personally, and they thanked us. I would also just, don't forget, just reiterate that message, keep it simple. My life now revolves around emergencies and disasters and wildfires and tsunamis and earthquakes and all these things. And there's all this just technical jargon that I think a lot of folks don't understand. So what I think is, I always say, what would my mom or my grandmother understand, at a basic level, if they were to see, a news story, if they were to read an article, if they were to pick up a fact sheet, what language would really resonate with them to be able to just fully understand the issue at hand. So I would just keep it simple and keep, your messaging straightforward, and really hone in on making it personal. I know I only have a little bit of time, but like I said in the beginning, I'm a product of a fellowship at the Capitol 10 years ago. I know some of you are young, and maybe you're going through the process of figuring out what you want to do with your life. I would be remiss if I didn't advocate for you really to take the opportunity, if you like what you do and you kind of meet with the staffers, to definitely think about that opportunity to be an intern, to go through a fellowship. I was with the Capitol Fellows program, and they essentially placed me in a senator's office. And this is how I got to meet, the Hemophilia Council, how I got to meet Terry and Lynn and everyone. And that was 10 years ago. And they had me working on bills and all these crazy things. So I just want to advocate for you to kind of find, if this piques your interest, just the slightest bit. Definitely want you to take advantage of some of the resources that are out there, and take advantage of me, please. I'm more than happy to help out, and be an advocate for you all as well. Lastly, before I let you get back to your regularly scheduled programming, now that I am with the Governor's Office of Emergency Services, we're considered an agency, and it's kind of that other branch of government. So you guys are going to be speaking to elected officials, to legislators, senators, assembly members. That's the legislative branch. I'm now in kind of that executive branch, and they're all, separate but equal, right? And so definitely really also consider kind of advocating with, the HHS, or Health and Human Services Agency, or whichever department really kind of corresponds with the issues that you guys are really passionate about. I will say that I've kind of seen now the budget process firsthand, and things just go in there. And It's really great to be able to have advocates on the elected side, but then also kind of advocates for you on that other side. So anyways, if you guys ever need help there, I know Terry is an expert on this, but it's definitely opened my eyes to kind of what is available and what resources and support are available out there on the executive branch level too. So I don't know if it's appropriate to ask for questions, but I'm happy to put my contact information in the chat. Please reach out, please take me up on the offer, and I would be more than happy to help you out any way I can.
Thank you so much, Deanna. So yeah, we have time. So if anybody has any questions for Deanna, now would be a great time to unmute or throw them in the chat. Oh, Carson, go for it.
Hey, I'm a political science major. I'm at Cal Poly right now. I'm supposed to meet Governor Newsom tomorrow, actually. Whether or not he's actually here is a whole other story. But so I guess I was wondering, I mean, the reason I'm majoring in political science is literally because of this program. Started it in my freshman year of high school, and it introduced me to the whole world of politics. So I guess I was kind of interested a little bit less on the hemophilia side. So if you want to email about it, but kind of how you got interested. I know you mentioned the Capital Fellows program and everything like that, but what kind of got you interested in your position and in the Hemophilia Council specifically?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's really exciting. And again, please, I would really consider you looking into the fellowship. I think I was, I kind of thought about what I wanted to do with my life, and I really love journalism and reporting and really kind of having a voice for the voiceless, essentially. And I thought, you know what, I want to learn a little bit more about state government, and that's how I went into the fellowship. It is for, folks who have graduated. So as long as you have a college degree, but the application period, you essentially apply in your senior year. I think that's really awesome. I really hope that you get to meet Governor Newsom. But essentially, I think for me is what I realized being in the legislature and being a staff person, like greeting all of the advocates, is that there are so many issues out there that without you guys, without the advocacy, without kind of Lynn, without this organization, a lot of the times we really don't have a voice for all of the things that are going on. And I really think that there was something really interesting there to be able to see that, hey, when you bring a coalition of people together, you can really make a difference in government. And I think that oftentimes, folks are jaded. We think that there isn't change, or it's stagnant, or we're kind of reinventing the wheel, but it's the same wheel. And so I think it was really nice to be able to see firsthand how elected officials, staff, and advocacy groups like you all really can come together to really just make a difference and make a positive change. I would just add too that, one of my first bills, and Lynn kind of, well, it was Terry and then Lynn thereafter, but brought me into kind of this healthcare world. And it was actually ensuring that hospitals were safe for babies. And it was ensuring that, there was advocacy there for mothers who could breastfeed first and not have, formula only available to new mothers. And I think that me as a 22-year-old back then, I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think, I would have thought that doctors always had, their best interest in me and my health and my baby's health. And there's just a bigger world out there that if it wasn't groups like you guys advocating for your specific cause, we wouldn't be able to make the changes we are now able to make. So I think that, you guys are doing really great work. And if there's any little interest you have, I invite you to, if you're ever in Sacramento, I'm more than happy to show you guys around if you're ever, comfortable coming in person.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much. Deanna, any other questions? I threw it in the chat because so we do have a number of, so we have our future leaders that you've spoken to before who are participating in Legislative Day, who are high school students. We also now have an Advocacy and Access Ambassadors program, which is for adults that are out, have now beyond high school, but might be interested in becoming more engaged advocates. And Carson and a couple of others that are participating in our Advocacy Ambassadors program are college students who, I can definitely see their interest in politics. And I have a lot of friends that did the Capitol Fellows program as well, and definitely encourage them to apply. So I see that Deanna put the link in the chat for those that might want to learn more about that. And excuse me, also put our contact information in there. So thank you so much for all of those tips. Things hold, we are going to be bringing our future leaders to Sacramento in July. So I'll follow up with you. Maybe we can have you come back and say hello to them in person. That would be fun. So thank you for that. And we are going to go ahead and transition to our next topic, which is, you kind of touched on this. That was a good intro to our, our short elevator type speech of how we want to introduce folks to the legislators. So thank you for that. Okay. All right. So kind of going back to our topics and how we want to structure our meetings. One thing that we haven't maybe always done as good of a job in terms of preparing for Legislative Day is reminding folks that we kind of live and breathe bleeding disorders in our world. Most of us were probably born into it, and we've sort of known about our bleeding disorder most of our lives. So we can forget that the people that we're talking to may not have any familiarity with bleeding disorders. There may not be much of anything that they know about. And it's always good to start with like a very brief introduction. Something like she was saying, something simple. Think about how you would explain something to, someone in your family, or even a child, even maybe somebody that is more of a child, just so that there's like a broad, they have a broad overview before you jump into the specifics of your story that's going to illustrate, one person's experience. So this year we prepared a little very short bulleted, 90 seconds of what is a bleeding disorder that you can reference, and have one person on your team reference at the beginning. So this would come kind of after you do everyone's brief introductions. And then an easy transition is for somebody in the group to ask the person that you're meeting with, are you familiar with bleeding disorders? Or have you ever heard of hemophilia? Or have you ever heard of von Willebrand's disease? Like, you can just maybe pick a question, and then that can give you a little context. Some of the folks that you're meeting with have met with us in the past, and so they do have some familiarity with bleeding disorders. Or they may be more of a, expert in the weeds on health policy. So maybe they're familiar with GHPP and CCS. Others, they might be newer staff people. Maybe they've switched policy areas. And so they may not be familiar at all. So we want you to give like a little bit of a sort of a broad overview before you jump into your personal stories. So that might be something like, bleeding disorders, which includes hemophilia, von Willebrand disease, and other clotting disorders, are rare disorders with only about 30 to 33,000 hemophilia patients in the US, and about 4,000 in California. There are about 3 million people with von Willebrand disease nationally, and just under 400,000 in California. One sort of easier way to say what bleeding disorders are might be something along the lines of, bleeding disorders makes your body unable to form a blood clot because you're missing a specific protein in your blood. And you can also explain that when your blood doesn't clot normally, it means you can experience bleeding into your joints, your muscles, and soft tissues. You bruise easily. Women can have heavy menstrual periods. Lots of people have nosebleeds, and sometimes extended bleeding after cuts or blood draws or other dental or surgical procedures. And then it would also be helpful to give them context of the cost, right? So treatment for bleeding disorders includes an IV infusions, sometimes even daily, and that the medication costs are $250,000 to $300,000 annually and can be up to over $1 million for some patients, depending on whether or not they have what's called an inhibitor, which is an immune response to their factor. So that was more than 90 seconds, no question, because I threw in multiple of those examples, but helpful to give that brief overview at the meeting. Obviously, not every person in the group has to share all of those facts, but you can sort of designate someone to do that. And then that can lead directly into what it's like to live with a bleeding disorder and somebody sharing their personal story. And just to dovetail off of what Deanna said, we really want you to focus on spending as much time as you need to, within the times that you have, but more of the time that you have on those personal stories of understanding what it's like to live with a bleeding disorder. If you don't get through all the issues, that's okay, because we're going to leave the leaf behind and we're going to follow up with them with those issues. But if the reason that they're going to care about reading that follow-up is because you've shared that personal story, and they are thinking, wow, what this person goes through or deals with is amazing, and I want to see what I can do to help them. Okay, so is there any questions on that? All right, so I'll move us into sort of the specifics of the issues then. So we're going to be, as I said, talking about the state budget. Here are just some key talking points related to what's the status of the budget. The May revise was announced on Friday. This is the process. So every year the governor introduces a proposed budget in January. Then in May, the governor's office issues a revision to that budget, because what happens in April is that our taxes are due, right? So in April, the state gets by April, the state should have received everyone's taxes and has an estimate of what that revenue is going to look like. And so then at that point, they have to revise the budget up or down, depending on how accurate the revenue projections that they did in January were. Well, the revenue projections this time were off rather significantly, but they were off in I guess a helpful direction instead of an unhelpful direction, because there's a $97 billion surplus in the governor's budget. And so that means that now everyone is sort of rushing to see, oh, how are we going to spend that additional revenue, right? And everyone in all of the groups has opinions about how that should be spent. We're obviously, as the Hemophilia Council, particularly focused on things related to healthcare and making sure that the issues that we care about are funded in that large budget. So the good news is that California Children's Services and the Genetically Handicapped Persons Program, CCS and GHBP, are fully funded. They were fully funded in both the January and the May revise. Funding for the MTM fee, which is basically some additional funding for the dispensing of certain medication, including medications for bleeding disorders patients, was also funded. So that's a positive because that helps our providers. We are supporting the governor's proposal to expand Medi-Cal to cover undocumented immigrants in the age range of 26 to 49. So basically in past expansions of Medi-Cal, older undocumented workers were covered and children and younger undocumented workers were covered. But there's this gap in the middle. And I was just at a meeting this weekend, and the folks at our treatment centers down in San Diego were talking about patients that they see where they're able to see the children, but the children have mothers who are have mild bleeding disorders, say mild hemophilia. Their children are severe, And those mothers are not able to be seen because they don't have any coverage. And this expansion of Medi-Cal would solve that issue. And then it also includes an ongoing funding for telehealth and additional funding for sickle cell disease program. We're supporting the sickle cell proposal, and they are asking for 30 million. The governor did put it in at 5 million. So we're hoping that during the budget negotiation process that dollar amount gets increased. Okay, so I've already somewhat spoken about these, but the four main issues that are on the talking points that you have related to the budget are, continued coverage, eligibility and benefits for Medi-Cal, CCS, and GHPP, expanding full scope Medi-Cal to cover the undocumented from age 26 to 49. I didn't mention this one previously, but there is a budget proposal to create a rare disease advisory council. So we're supporting that request as well, as we believe that this would give the rare disease community more opportunity to connect with, kind of along the lines with what Deanna was saying, with the regulatory agencies. So with the folks in the executive branch that work on implementing all of these programs. And then, as I mentioned, supporting the funding for our rare disease allies and sickle cell for treatment centers, education, and outreach. So with all of that, and Mike put this question in the chat, one of the things that will be helpful for you to know as you go into these meetings is what type of insurance do you have and how has that been working for you? Because that may be an important part of your story. If you either are currently on CCS or were on CCS as a child, you can share as part of your story how that helped you. If you are either on GHPP currently or have been on GHPP in the past, again, you can share, what was positive about that experience and how that helped you. And so that could be a part of that could be a part of your story if that applies to you. Okay. Two other things that are not officially on our issue sheet, but I wanted to mention them because it's possible that a question could come up about them. I would say in most meetings, they tend to follow your lead and focus on the issues that you're bringing up, and they don't often bring up a question outside. But Medi-Cal RX has been a big issue of late and a big concern for people. So briefly, if you are not familiar with it and haven't heard us talk about it before, Medi-Cal RX is basically a new structure that the state implemented for paying pharmacy benefits. So for paying for prescriptions. Instead of plans, Medi-Cal managed care plans, paying those as part of their fees, all prescriptions that are either for Medi-Cal, CCS, or GHPP patients are now sort of paid for and administered through Medi-Cal RX. There were a lot of bumps in the implementation of this program in the early part of this year. But again, to what Deanna said about the importance of agencies and the executive branch, the council has been really working very, very closely with the Department of Healthcare Services and with Magellan, who is the company that is running, the state contracted with Magellan to run Medi-Cal RX. And we've been able to get a lot of measures in place to help our community and ensure that we continue to get the medications that we need. So if somebody brings up Medi-Cal RX and someone in the group is comfortable responding and is familiar with the issue, feel free to say something along the lines of, we really have appreciated being able to work with the department on this. They've been very responsive to our concerns and we're very supportive of the new clinical liaison team. If you're thinking, I cannot remember all of that stuff, that's fine. Just again, that's one of the situations where you could say, what, that's a really good question. And I'm not familiar with that issue, but I can have, Lynn from the council get back to you. And just let me know that that question was raised and we can follow up with their office. Cal-AIM is another program in Medi-Cal that provides what they like to call additional wraparound services. So those would be things like support for foster children or housing for the unhoused or other services that aren't maybe directly medical, but impact people's health and their ability to stay healthy. And so some patients with bleeding disorders will qualify for those additional services, and we are looking to hopefully expand access of bleeding disorders patients to the programs that Cal-AIM provides. Okay, so we're almost through this point and we'll be getting ready to send you into your breakout rooms very soon. So quickly, just a couple of follow-up points after your meetings. Be sure to say thank you, send an email, send a handwritten note. You can also engage in social media, and we have information about that in our toolkit. You know, if you're comfortable on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, you can create a nice post and tag your legislator that you met with in it. Also, like I just mentioned, update HCC on what you learned in your meetings. So somebody from your group should let us know, like, you know, what kind of the response that you got from everyone was. And then stay informed and keep following the process. Be on our mailing list, our email list, so that we can let you know like how things went with the budget and follow up with you on the results of these visits. Okay, so we're just about ready to go into breakout rooms, but if you have any questions on the issues that we've talked about, this would be a great time to bring them up. So I will run through these breakout rooms, but you know, I'll have one last chance for questions before I let you go. So in your breakout rooms, we're going to ask you to introduce yourselves, review your meeting schedule, and make sure you know who the constituents for each meeting are. You're going to decide who's going to share their story and who's going to discuss which issue for each meeting. Remember, you don't all need to be experts on all of the issues. You can share that responsibility within your group. We would love to get photos for during each meeting. I see your question, Carolyn, so I will make sure we get to you before we close out. And then we did ask your team leaders to create a text group so that if there's any last minute schedule changes or anything like that, it'll be easy for your team leader to get in touch with you. So Carolyn, what was your question?
Okay, great. There was so much covered. I just was wondering, along the lines of keeping it simple, if you could just give a summary of so we can all be united on what is our main objective and goal in one sentence.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have the talking points list. I think the main objective, though, to really keep it simple is to raise awareness about bleeding disorders, right? And you're going to accomplish that by telling your story. That's your main goal. And your group leaders are going to sort of help you focus that through in terms of how that's going to play out in each of your meetings. And that's what you're going to get a chance to do in a few minutes, is sort of strategize that out a little bit. So it hopefully won't be quite so nebulous. But at the end of the day, what we're really trying to accomplish is to raise awareness about bleeding disorders so that when these issues come up, you know, the legislators who are voting on them will have context for what that is and what it means for our community. Does that help?
Yes, perfect. Thanks, Lynn.
All right, any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question real quick. For the staff members that we're meeting, and if they
Rigo, you kind of, I don't know if it's just on my end, but you got super garbled there at the end. I didn't get to hear your question, Rigo. Hey, Rigo, can you?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, can you maybe either turn off, I don't know if your camera's on, maybe try turning off your camera and then asking it, or just type it into the chat, because it was really garbled. So I'm not sure
Yeah,
what you were
sorry.
trying to ask.
I'll type it in. I'll type it in.
Okay, so we'll give Rigo a second to type it in. Does anyone else have a question while Rigo types it into the chat? Okay, I'm gonna real quick while he's doing that, take a minute to thank our sponsors. National Hemophilia Foundation, Every Life Foundation, and Red Chip Enterprises were specifically sponsors to help us put things together for Legislative Day. And then Takeda, Sanofi, and BioMarin are our platinum and silver sponsors this year of some of our overall programming, including Legislative Day. So we'll go back to the breakout room. Your team leaders know this information as well in terms of what to cover in the meetings, but all right, Rigo. Oh yes, you need the yeah, I think we've already gotten that. I think that's in the calendar invites, but we'll make sure the team leaders have the contact information in case staff is late. Okay, so any last questions before we send you to your groups? I'm not hearing any. So we're going to go ahead and put you into your breakout rooms. If team leaders, I will be with my group in the main room. So if you run into any problems or questions, you can come back, you can message back to the main room, or come in, if you need to, and I can help you out. Otherwise, go ahead and go through things with your group. And once you've accomplished the goals for this evening and everyone feels ready, then you can go ahead and sign off for the evening. So thank you all for joining us. I may not see all of you again, but we are ready to go. So we will send you into your breakout rooms. Thanks, everyone.